Hi there, thank you for stopping by. My name is Daniel and I collect stamps. In our previous episode, we talked about American stamps issued between 1938 and 1959. I showed you stamps from my personal collection, but I did not talk about the varieties because I do not collect varieties. And in today's episode, I want to talk about major varieties of the stamps from the period we covered. As I said, I do not collect varieties, and I don't really have any stamps from my personal collection to show you, but I'm pretty sure we can find some worthy examples on the web. Stamp varieties is a very important part of stamp collecting because some of them have very significant premium over regular stamps, and they're really fun to look for. So let's go back to 1938 and start exploring varieties from that period on. First, I want to talk about a variety that is very common to all perforated stamps, not only American but worldwide. This variety is known as horizontal or vertical pair imperforated between. It could be more than a pair, but usually they found as pairs, and that's how they usually collected. What we look for is for the pair of stamps that's supposed to be perforated on all four sides, or in case of a coil on two sides, that's that missing perforation between the two stamps. As you can see here in this picture, there is supposed to be a perforation line here between the two stamps, but it is missing. As you can see here from the sold prices, these stamps have very significant premium over regular stamps. Let's say regular stamps 3 cents, usually worth about a few pennies. This one, in perforated pair, worth about $1,300. But you need to be aware of stamps with blind perforation. Like in this example, the perforation is there, but it's not really visible, and there are some stamps when you can barely see the perforation, and those stamps sometimes offer it as imperforated between stamps, and while they're not. Those stamps does not count as imperforated between. Those are just regular stamps with blind perforation, so you need to watch out for that. Another variety that is common to many perforated stamps is gutter pair. Gutter is a large white space between the two stamps. Usually stamps spaced equally on the sheet, and there's only small space between the two stamps. But sometimes, for different reasons, the gutter occurs, which is a large white space between the two stamps. And here are some other examples of the gutter. In a lot of cases, gutter there is intentional, and in those cases, those stamps doesn't really have any significant premium, but sometimes gutter occurs unintentionally, and those stamps considered errors, and they have significant premium. And gutter pairs don't have as much of a premium as in perforated between stamps, but they also sometimes command a decent price. And as we look at the case of 3-cent stamps from the 1938 issue, the stamps with gutter cataloged around $150 to $200, while stamps imperforated between around $1,500 to $2,500. Those are catalog prices. They usually don't sell for as high, but still they're pretty nice finds if you can find one. And as I already mentioned, gutter pairs or imperforated between pairs are very common to most perforated stamps. So we're not going to discuss those in details for every single stamp, though I assume those are present for many stamps from the period we covered. And now let's look at the varieties that are not common to many stamps, but can only be found on very specific ones. And let's start with $1 stamp from 1938 issue that has a watermark variety. This is a $1 stamp we're talking about, and normally it was printed without the watermark. However, in 1951, the stamp was reprinted, and instead of regular unwatermarked paper, paper watermark USIR was used. USIR stands for United States Internal Revenue, and that paper was only intended to be used on revenue stamps. And this is how that watermark looks. The letters are double-lined, and you usually will see only one or maybe portion of 2 letters on one stamp. You won't see the entire USRI, but just presence of a watermark on this $1 stamp indicates that this is a the variety is USIR watermark. This variety doesn't really have a very high premium. My older catalog shows $200 for mint stamp and $65 for used, which is not a lot, but still fun to find. This entire series doesn't really have any other varieties outside of minor color variations, so we'll move on to the next interesting stamp. Another stamp is a variety worth mentioning, is this Win the War stamp from 1942. Normally, the stamp was printed in the color of violet, but some stamps were printed in the color of purple. And according to my catalogs, this stamp in color of purple can only be found as pre-cancelled. And here I'm getting some confusing different information from different catalogs. My standard catalog says that pre-cancel was either Los Angeles, California or Fremont, Ohio. However, my specialized catalog says that there were 26 different pre-cancels. And I don't know for sure, but the way I discern this is there were 26 different pre-cancels, but the ones from Los Angeles and Fremont are the most common ones. And for those of you who don't know what pre-cancel is, this is a special type of cancel that was applied prior to sales of stamps, and it shows two black bars and the name of city and state in between. And this stamp was sold at auction as the purple variety, and it actually has a certificate of authenticity with the stamp, which is kind of must have if you want to buy this type of stamp. This variety doesn't really have high value, but it's much significant premium over regular stamp, which only catalogs at 20 cents. So a certificate of authenticity is a must-have when you purchase this type of stamp. Next group of stamps with interesting varieties is Overrun Countries issue of 1943-1944. And here again my catalogs are providing different information. My standard catalog lists many varieties, while my specialized catalog only lists few and notes that there are numerous varieties, and they just don't want to list them all. And you know, as too, we're not gonna go into all the varieties, as there are many. We can spend the entire video just talking about those varieties, but I'm gonna show you some to look for. Let's say, like in this case, you have doubling of word in Austria. So you look for doubling of some of the names of the countries. Another interesting variety to look for is the reverse printing of colors. Normally, black would be the last color to print. However, sometimes printing sequence was not followed properly, and sometimes other colors were printed on top of black. Like in this case, red was printed over black, and you can clearly see this black is hidden under the red color. And this is the variety you look for. This is also common to nearly all the stamps from this series. And here is an example of reverse printing of colors from the Scott catalog. You can clearly see the black color is hidden behind red or blue. And this type of reverse printing variety is common to nearly all stamps from this series. And in case of Greece, this is actually the normal printing, when the pale blue was printed over dark blue. So you look for reverse actually. And one other variety to look for is a double impression of black on Yugoslavia stamps. This is how double impression looks like. You see there is many lines. And this is how normal stamp look like. You see there's a lot less printing of black lines on the flag. Again, you see more lines here on this stamp. And pricing for such variety varies. They usually sell for about $200–300 a piece. Some more, some less. Again, depends where you're buying it from, auction or trying to buy it on eBay. On eBay you gotta be careful because many are offered as reverse printing or a doubling of black lines, but when they're actually not. They just look like they're just weak printing of black sometimes. And even though the prices for varieties are not very high, this is a really fun series to work with Basically, every stamp in a series has some sort of flow, some sort of variety, and there are 13 stamps in the series. The stamps are very common, pretty cheap to buy, and you can spend a lot of time just going through the stamps looking for those varieties. And in the period between 1944 and 1954, there basically no stamps were issued with noticeable varieties besides cutters and perforated between, because most stamps were issued as single color stamps, monocolored. In 1954, a set of definitive stamps known as Liberty issue was printed, and a 2-cent stamp, we'll start with 2-cent stamp. There are actually several varieties we're going to look at, but 2-cent stamp was printed on 2 different types of paper. The majority of the stamps was issued on regular paper, but experimental group of stamps of about 50,000 was printed on special silk coat paper. And I was unable to find any real information on silk coat paper beside that it was white and smooth, very white and very smooth. I found a couple examples that were sold at the auction that was offered as silk coat paper with certificate, so let's look at them. Here's one example, and here's another, and both have a certificate because you really need to have one if you want to buy or sell that type of stamp. And one thing I should note about this series, it was printed using 2 different printing methods, wet and dry printing, but the prices are nearly the same or vary slightly, so we're not going to discuss this as separate varieties. This definitive series was printed from 1954 through 1968, was reprinted several times, and in 1963 United States Postal Service started experimenting with some phosphorescent coating. They called it tagging, and some reissues of these stamps starting from 1963 were tagged, and that tagging can only be seen with ultraviolet light, and since prices are not much different or not significantly higher, we're not going to discuss tagging in details. This can be a whole another video just for tagging alone. So I'm going to skip all tagging varieties of this issue and move on to more interesting variety, which is the double impression of carmine on an 8-cent stamp. This variety only known on the stamp of this particular design, because there are similar designs of the stamp, and only in the flat plate printing variety. And this is how this variety looks like. You can clearly see doubling of carmine color. And the last stamp with interesting varieties that was issued between 1938 and through 1959, it's a Champion of Liberty issue of 1959, 8-cent stamp. This stamp was printed using 3 different colors: ochre, the medal, ultramarine, these ribbons, and carmine. And there are known varieties of this stamp, one with missing ochre, this medal, another with missing these ribbons, ultramarine, another one with missing both the medal and ribbons, and the third one was missing all of the 3 colors. And the stamp that's missing all 3 colors is usually collected in a strip with a progressive loss of color, or at least with another stamp that's showing partial colors. The prices for those missing color varieties are quite significant, and I was unable to find any of the images of the varieties. The only thing I was able to find is this image, which not really a missing color variety. This is just some missing print caused by folded paper or something. This is not really varieties. This is usually called freaks or oddities. And this was all for today. I hope you really enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something from it. And please stay tuned for my next video, where we're going to continue to explore American stamps, and we're going to start with year 1960. And thank you very much for all the wonderful comments you leave in me. I really appreciate your feedback and your support. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.